everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, hey, I'm Sidney. Every single Thursday I sit down and I talk about either a crime, a cult, or a conspiracy. So today's video is a conspiracy theory, and this one was highly requested by pretty much every single person that's in my life. So if you request this video, you're welcome. Today's video follows the conspiracy around what exactly happened to Princess Diana. Now, let me be clear, this is not to harm any individual. This is not to cause anything. This is just a theory about what happened to her death. Like, what exactly caused her death. Her death was real and true and tragic, and this is not to downplay that by any means. This is strictly a conspiracy theory or different conspiracy theories as to what might have happened if it wasn't an accident. Like I said, this is not fact. This is just a theory. This story is actually really tragic. This happened in August of 1997, and obviously this story is going to kind of basically tie in true crime along with a conspiracy because, this is a real story of a death, and it's very sad, but a lot of people have believed that her death was intentional, and so this video is mainly just focusing on the theories around that as well. We are going to give a summary of her life leading up to it, which is why I say it's more of a true crime conspiracy type of video tying in together. This is just probably one of the most popular conspiracy theories, so that is why I wanted to cover it, because it's very interesting, and I've always wanted to do this case because it's crazy to me. So without further ado, this is Crimes, Cults, and Conspiracies with me, Sidney. On July 1st, 1961, Diana Frances Spencer was born and was the youngest daughter of the British nobles John Spencer and Frances Shan. She didn't come from the royal family exactly, but her family for generations was very, very, very close to the royal family. Her parents definitely had a ton of money. She grew up in a huge mansion, and she was definitely very privileged. Her mother was known to not be a really good mother, and when Diana was only 7 years old, her mom and her father ended up getting a divorce, and her father had gained full custody of all of the kids. Diana said that she really wasn't upset about the divorce because she was really close with her father, so her living with her father was going to be a lot better than living with her mother. Her father, whenever she moved in with him, he was living on an estate on the royal family's land. And although that was very privileged and, it was an exciting time, like she had a lot of money, she actually explained her childhood to be very unhappy. She knew from the start that she was going to be a very important figure, and that kind of took a toll on her, knowing very early on that you're going to have this important role later on in life. She didn't really get to experience being a kid. Although Diana did come from wealth, when she was 17, she was accepting low-paying jobs like being a nanny or even cleaning houses. And she lived in a small flat with like 7 other friends. But when Diana was only 19 years old, Prince Charles had actually started showing a pretty big interest in her. And she loved this because growing up, she had the biggest crush on him, even though he was a lot older than she was. In 1981, their relationship had moved pretty fast, and Charles ended up proposing to Diana, which was a pretty big deal because he was being pushed to find someone, marry them, and have children so that there could be heirs to the royal throne. Whoever the princess or princesses date is actually a really big deal because this means that one day they could either be queen or king of the throne, depending on, who marries into the family. Their relationship was very off. They didn't really love each other. And I'm not saying that as like a joke. I'm just saying like it was very pushed upon them to, I guess, get married. And they weren't fully in love with each other, but Charles really wanted to go ahead and push through with it, even though he kind of had interest in someone else for a while. Charles himself, even whenever he was asked one day if he was in love with Diana, he explained whatever love means, and Diana explained this as very hurtful and traumatizing because this was public whenever he said this.
What does in love mean? Well, it's your own interpretation. Obviously, it means two very happy people. Well, from us, congratulations. Thank you very much.
I was brought up in the sense that, when you got engaged with someone, you love them. And the most extraordinary thing is we had this ghastly interview on the day we announced our engagement, and this ridiculous ITN man said, "Are you in love?" So I thought, what a thick question. So I said, yes, of course we are, in the sort of fat, slow ranger that I was. And Charles turned around and said, what ever in love means. That threw me completely. I thought, what a strange question. And answer. God, it traumatized me.
On July 29th, 1981 is when the royal wedding happened, and around 750 million people tuned in to watch this wedding. After the wedding, she was now the third highest ranking woman in the royal family at only 20 years old. She was very genuine and very honest, and she kind of was a rebellious woman. She didn't really abide by the royal family rules. She didn't really believe in most of the rules and kind of wanted to make her own rules herself. At this point in their marriage, there was so much pressure for the two to have kids. So this is when Prince William and then Prince Harry came around 2 years later after Prince William. She was such a good mom, and she was different than any other royal woman in the family. She didn't want to have a nanny. She wanted to be the one to take care of the kids herself, because a lot of times whenever you're born into a very rich or very wealthy family, you have so much that you have to do. You're very, very busy. So you hire a nanny to basically raise the kids that you produce. So she didn't really want to do that. She was like, I am the mother. These are my kids. I want to raise them and bathe them and put them to bed myself. Since she wanted to do everything else as a mom should, this was very different because no other woman in the royal family had done this before. And Diana was unlike any other woman in the royal family. She was more relatable, which the people loved and they looked up to, and she made her own path and own decisions that other members of the family did not like about her. During the AIDS pandemic, Diana was actually the very first person to shake hands with a person who had AIDS and explained that that was not how AIDS was spread. She was donating a lot of money to this charity. She was the first person who was famous and royal to touch someone with AIDS, and that was unheard of. Everybody was kind of confused as to why she did it, but she was just trying to not shame people with AIDS. Nobody should be shaming them. You can shake their hands. It's not that type of disease that's spread, And this moment, whenever she actually had shook hands with somebody with AIDS, was public. It was photographed and it was sent out to the public, which kind of brought a lot of calm down that all this misinformation about AIDS was being spread. And now that, this royal highness is shaking hands with somebody, it's safe. You can do that. It wasn't just the AIDS virus, though. She had donated a lot of money to numerous different charities. She was very strong in mental health and viewed mental health very highly and was basically an advocate for it. And the people just really loved her because she didn't really portray herself as being better than anyone, even though she was in such a high royal family. Everybody knew who the royal family was. The media at this time, however, along the years, would only post about her negatively, especially her weight and her body. And she had to stay in a lot of times, so she just wouldn't keep getting portrayed negatively, and this took a really depressing toll on her. The royals were starting to view her as putting a very bad rep and a very bad name to their name. They were being very passive-aggressive to her, which also made her really unhappy, which didn't help because she was already depressed because the media viewed her so negatively just by her body. So she wasn't really in a good place at this time. So you know how I said earlier that Prince Charles actually had a interest in another woman? Well, this actually led to an affair, and this woman's name was Camilla. So Diana had actually found out about this affair, and whenever she had confronted Prince Charles about it, he didn't try to deny it. He literally said that he wasn't about to be the first prince who never had a mistress. What the... Actually, you can break that narrative, That's not a bad thing. So their marriage was not happy, and it wasn't portrayed differently in the media either. People knew that the two were having problems, and Charles' affair led to Diana having an affair of her own with a man named James Hewitt. This is another little extra conspiracy theory. Theory, not fact. People believe that James is actually Prince Harry's father because they have a very striking resemblance. They are almost literally identical, so maybe the affair had started earlier than what we believed, but that is alleged. That's a theory. An alleged theory, like, don't come for me. In 1992 is when the couple finally split, and Diana went on a BBC interview that completely ruined Charles and the royal family's reputation. She explained that she felt very lonely and even explained that they both had affairs, but in the end, the divorce concluded due to the Queen demanding a divorce in August of 1996. So this divorce did end up causing Diana to lose her title of the Princess of Wales, and Prince Charles started dating Camilla shortly after this, which the Queen didn't like, obviously, because it was an affair. It caused the breakup. And they're actually still together to this day, but it doesn't really matter. That's not the point, but it's still gross. In 1997, Diana started seeing a guy named Dodi Fayed. Dodi's father was actually an Egyptian billionaire, and one of the first times Dodi and Diana were out together in public, they were followed around by the paparazzi the entire day. They were on this huge party boat together, so she had not escaped the famous lifestyle. She was still very much sought out by the media. A lot of people really wanted to see what she was up to after the divorce, and now that there is a new love interest, people kind of took this and ran with it. So in August of 1997, they were staying in a hotel that was in Paris that was owned by Dodi's father. This was going to be a very romantic weekend because allegedly Dodi was going to propose to Diana. This is not, truthfully confirmed, but Dodi had allegedly sent up 2 rings to the room that they were staying in so that he could propose to Diana that night. Diana and Dodi were supposed to go out of the hotel and go to a very nice restaurant, but they were being swarmed by paparazzi and really couldn't even leave. So they decided to stay in the restaurant that was inside of the hotel that they were staying at. But Dodi had a weird suspicion that paparazzi were undercover inside of the hotel's restaurant, and so he decided to get room service delivered up to their room from the restaurant that they were eating at. They decided to leave where they were eating and just camp out and be isolated from the paparazzi in their own room. Of course, they didn't want to be swarmed by paparazzi because they were still yelling outside. They couldn't really have a very nice dinner and a very nice night together. Maybe, allegedly, because Dodi was going to propose to her and he didn't want all of that ruckus, So they decided they were going to pack up their stuff and head to Dodi's apartment, which was outside of the hotel. Henri Paul was the head of security at the Ritz Hotel, which is the hotel owned by Dodi's father, and he was going to drive the couple over to Dodi's apartment. They had a plan to basically trick the paparazzi by having security sit outside the front door, making it seem like they were about to exit from the front door, even though they were going to trick them and leave outside of the back of the hotel. One of Diana's security members refused for her to go by herself, and so he climbed in the passenger seat of the car with Henri Paul, and then Dodi and Diana were in the back of the car. However, there were a few paparazzi that were still hanging out in the back, so a few of them did see them get into this car, and they ended up following them. While he was driving, he ended up going through a tunnel which led to Dodi's apartment, and the driver, Henri Paul, ended up crashing the car into the 13th pillar, and the only person to survive was Diana's security guard. He was the only person wearing his seatbelt. Dodi was thrown out of the car around 20 yards away from the crash, and since the paparazzi had been following them at this point, they were the first ones on the scenes to take as many photos as they could, which I obviously find very disrespectful. Dr. Frederick Molly said he heard Diana's last words say, "Oh my God, leave me alone. Please, leave me alone," while paparazzi was only inches away from her face, snapping photos through the car as she was there dying. The car was so crushed that Diana's body actually had to be cut out, not her body being cut, but they had to cut the car open with a chainsaw and take her out of the car. That's how bad it was crushed. They couldn't even open the doors or get her out through a window. It was that bad. Diana was not even transported to a hospital until an hour after the crash had happened, which was at 12:23 a.m. She was transferred to the hospital around 1:20 a.m. after suffering cardiac arrest and had to be resuscitated twice in the ambulance. Diana reached the hospital around 2 a.m., which kind of seems very far from the time that she was actually put in the ambulance and transported, and she tragically had passed away during one of her surgeries to try and save her. She was pronounced dead at 4 a.m. at only 36 years old. Diana's security guard Trevor, who was the only one that had survived the crash, was alive, but he had broken every single bone in his face. He was in a coma for 10 days in the hospital, and the last thing he remembered before getting into the crash was that he had gotten into the limo before the crash. People were very suspicious of this accident and really wanted answers, so they felt that they could ask the only survivor of this crash, but he couldn't remember, so they couldn't get the answers that they wanted. The official report focused mainly on Henri Paul because it is said that he caused the reckless driving by drunk driving. He was highly intoxicated and he had a blood alcohol content level over 3 times the legal limit, which meant that he was not just like 2 or 3 beers in. He had had multiple drinks that night. He should have literally never gotten behind the wheel with how much he had drank. Another suspicious thing was that the tunnel that, they just had this crash in was only open 24 hours after the initial crash. They had hosed it down with some special detergent and it was open to the public. And I know this sounds so sad and so awful with what I'm about to say, but it just seems like that's something that they would do with a normal citizen and just a normal everyday type of fatal crash, not something that they would do for the Royal Highness, Princess of Wales, like it seems like they would put more effort into finding out and collecting all the evidence at the scene, but they had hosed everything away. They probably washed away tons of evidence. Many people immediately started to investigate exactly what had happened into Princess Diana's death. They started speculating. They didn't really believe that this was just a tragic accident. They believed that this was kind of a planned accident. Officials didn't even fully investigate her death until 10 years later. The public pushed and pressured British officials to look more into her death and see exactly what had happened, which caused Operation Paget, or Paget. I don't know. I've heard both ways. So, Operation Paget was an inquiry to find the truth to the conspiracy theories that were surrounding Princess Diana's death. But this was not started until 2004, and it was completed in 2008. They looked into over 175 conspiracy theories, but they ended up concluding that none of these theories were real, and it was caused by the reckless acts of Henri Paul, due to his drunk driving. Princess Diana's funeral had over 2 billion people viewing from all over the world. So many people knew about her and they loved her, and she just had such a big impact on everyone around her. That is why so many people quickly jumped to theorize what exactly had happened to her and what caused her death, if it was even an accident. So, let's go over a few theories as to what might have happened to Princess Diana. Remember, these are theories, none of these are fact. So, the first theory was that the security guard was actually hired to plan this out. And we won't say hired by who, but we can all guess. So, this head of security, his salary was only around $30,000 a year, but at the time of his death, he had over $250,000 in his bank account. Obviously, he had known the dangers and the possibility as to what might happen in this crash, so he did that specifically to help his family out. If he were to pass in this crash, which tragically he did, all of the money would end up being split onto his family. So remember that his blood alcohol content level was over 3 times the legal limit? Well, if you look at security footage that was moments and just a little bit earlier before he had drove, he seemed fine and competent enough to drive. Now, moments before leading up to the crash, investigators wanted to go see those moments on security cameras, but, of course, none of the security cameras were working that night. And hear me out. All of your security cameras should be working. If a security camera goes out, you give money to whoever needs to fix it, bada bing, bada boom, it should work, right? And then also, why is it just now not working whenever we could see that on Roy Paul's security camera, that was working, but it didn't have security cameras around that were working at the time of the death. Like, you know what I'm saying? How are they not working now? What is going on? What are you doing? Okay, so I realize whenever I'm editing I realize now that I'm editing this video back, let me give some clarification. I'm not talking about the hotel video footage. I'm actually talking about every CCTV footage on the route that Princess Diana was taking was not facing the road. None of the cameras were facing the road that she was taking. All of them were facing away from the exact route that Princess Diana was taking. So that is why it's a weird thing. I wasn't talking about the hotel footage. You can actually watch like an hour or 2 hours on YouTube of footage in the hotel. But from moments leading up to her crash while she was like in the car, or even leaving to get into the car all the way up to the crash, there was no cameras that were available to show. They weren't working, or they were facing away. That's what I meant. Sorry, I just felt like I needed to come in and clarify. Alright, enjoy the show. The second theory is that Dodi and Diana actually fell pregnant, and that is why they were assassinated. Again, a theory. If this were true, that would mean that Dodi would have to marry into the royal family and become a stepfather to Diana's 2 other children. And the royal family didn't really like that because Dodi was of Egyptian descent, so he didn't really fit the same pasty narrative of the royal family. He didn't really fit and vibe well in that environment because he was not white. Let's just be honest, let's just be racist for a second. He was not white. This theory can be somewhat debunked because her autopsy showed that she was not pregnant at the time of her death, but whoever had assassinated her, a theory, wouldn't have known that, you know? So they wouldn't have known that until after she had passed. But these were just rumors because before she had passed, there were rumors going around that her and Dodi had a big announcement, which could have been the engagement. She might have known that he was going to propose to her. You just don't know. But yeah, it's just really sad. Dodi's father actually believes in this theory that both of them were assassinated due to his Egyptian descent, and I kind of believe this too, because think about how they're treating Meghan Markle. She has the dark hair, the dark skin, she doesn't really fit that pale narrative like the royal family has going on. I get again, if you're racist, just say so, okay? We can all tell. Theory number 3 is actually the one that people believe the most, and that is that Diana actually was murdered by British authorities. However, she knew that it was going to happen. There was actually a note that Diana had gave to her butler, and I'm going to read this note right now. The main part that I'm going to read out basically reads, "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car." Do what? That's a real note. That's a real note. There was an affair that Diana had with one of the employees working for the royal family. Now, whenever they found out about this employee had actually died in a car accident only a few days after being fired. Since he had passed, this really frightened Diana, and she truly believed that she was next. Which, technically, she was next, but we don't really know if both of these were true accidents or homicides. Alleged homicides. The fourth and final theory is that Princess Diana did not receive the proper medical treatment that she was supposed to, which was only intended to scare her and not actually kill her, which obviously she had passed and they weren't really expecting that, but the ambulance that was carrying her body to the hospital that she ended up arriving at had actually passed another hospital, which would have made more sense for them to go there since that was closest. Like I had said earlier, it took them a long time from picking her up to get her to the hospital. This hospital was further away from the crash than the hospital that she went to was further away from the crash than the hospital that they had passed, which I don't know if that was because that was where they were called to. But even then, if somebody so important was passing away, wouldn't you think you would get to the closest hospital? And she was also kept at the scene for a very long time, which, like, why would they do that? I know that in, like, European countries, or maybe just, like, UK or whatever, they're actually supposed to respond at the scene and give medical treatment at the scene, and then put them in the ambulance. But, like, here in the US, we just put them in the ambulance and send them to the hospital. They don't get treatment at the scene. So maybe that's why, but it was unreasonably long, especially with somebody so important. So you can actually go and read a lot of different theories about Princess Diana's death. These were just the ones that stuck out to me the most and made the most sense to me because of, I guess, just everything added in and combined, you know? Like, this is such a sad case because if you really, I didn't grow up, like, learning about Princess Diana, or I didn't see her in real life, you know? I was born in 99, so I didn't. Plus, I'm a U.S. citizen. The U.S. citizen doesn't really show the media from other countries. It's mainly just our own type of shit that we got going on in our country. Everybody that had explained Princess Diana and talked about her always talked so highly of her. And so she was just so charismatic, and not in the manipulative way. She was just a very kind person, and she was very genuine. Everybody loved Princess Diana. Basically what I'm saying is, she was just an overall beautiful person and didn't really deserve this tragic accident or theorized alleged murder. I just want to know what you guys believe. A lot of people wanted me to cover this and explain basically different theories that had possibly happened, which obviously I wanted to look into like as well, because I've only just heard theories, never really researched my own theories. So yeah, what do you guys believe about this case? Like, do you believe that she was murdered, or do you really think it was just a freak accident that people were just taking and running with it because, you know, I mean, royal family didn't really like her. She had an affair. That could have also been another motive. Again, alleged theory. Whoever is listening, it was just a theory. Okay, I think that's going to be it from me today, guys. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends. And be sure to tune in every single Thursday, because you're either going to get a crime, cult, or a conspiracy. You never know. It just depends on my mood. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next Thursday. Bye!